and Managing Director of Stella Spark International. Esther is guiding the conversation. She is a leadership and business transformation expert with nearly 20 years of international experience. And as the Vice Chair of the Malaysian and New Zealand Chamber of Commerce, she helps to strengthen as well the business ties with focus on sustainable growth.
Good morning, everyone, once again. It's great to see everyone buzzing with a little bit of energy. Hopefully that comes from the market, like you say. And so, yeah, everything rises and falls in leadership. And when we talk about climate action, that statement carries real weight. And because the way we lead today determines the sustainability of our economies tomorrow. So this high-level dialogue will focus on how regional collaboration, policy alignment, and cross-border partnerships are essential for achieving sustainable, climate-resilient economic growth across Asia. So really, it's about leadership in motion. So today, hopefully, we will have a very fun and interactive conversations around how countries, businesses, and institutions across Asia work beyond borders to align policies, strengthen partnerships, and also build resilient economies that thrive in this changing climate. So each of our panelists here brings a distinct yet complementary perspective from diplomacy and policy to international collaboration and business sustainability. Together, they represent a full ecosystem of what regional cooperation can look like when purpose meets partnership. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin. And let's give our panel a round of applause just right before we start. Wonderful. Alright, there's a saying, Helen Keller, that captures this theme beautifully. They say, oh, we can do so little, but together we can do so much. Right, so actually, first question, as Australia's regional climate councillor for Southeast Asia, you're deeply engaged in shaping regional dialogue on climate and economic cooperation. Australia has long been a close and trusted partner to ASEAN, particularly in areas of green trade, clean energy transition, and regional partnerships. So from your perspective, how can Australia and ASEAN work together to build green investment taxonomies that help accelerate cross-border investments in low-carbon technologies and sustainable infrastructure? Over to you. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Esther. It's great to be here at Summit'25. It's very important to scaling investment to have clear and articulate taxonomies to deploy greater finance towards the energy transition, carbon markets, and venture-based markets. A challenge for investment committees is navigating the many overlapping taxonomies. And so really having the clarity and the credibility to understand that whatever they're investing in is not greenwashing and is demonstrating the sort of underpinnings of the green transition. So Australia has released its own roadmap for sustainable finance. And that sort of sets the timeline for a range of initiatives to support climate finance. And just in June this year, Australia, through the Australian Sustainable Finance Institute, released its taxonomy. Where I think there's opportunities is to collaborate with ASEAN to sort of align these taxonomies. The Australian one is very focused, I think, on the sectors that matter to Australia and sort of aligns with our economy, but to sort of, I guess, create the scale required, I think we need really to sort of align those with ASEAN. There's also the multi-jurisdictional common ground taxonomy, and I think if we can work through the COP and Paris Agreement process to align a global taxonomy, again, that provides the credibility, but the flexibility to sort of align investments with sort of on-the-ground realities. I think that would have a really powerful impact in sort of scaling finance in underserved regions. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Thanks, Ashley, for those insights, highlighting how how this all can be aligned. And of course, all collaboration is most effective when both the public and private sectors also look into working hand in hand. You know, as the saying goes, the plan is only as good as the people all who carries it out together. So now, like Faros, I'm just jumping to Faros first, is the Executive Director of the UN Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei. You've closely been, involved in guiding companies, large and small, on embedding sustainability into the business model. So, from your experiences, what are the two most significant barriers preventing SMEs across ASEAN from integrating ESG principles into the supply chain? That's one. And then another quick question around that is what kind of public-private partnerships could help overcome these barriers and make sustainability more accessible for businesses across different levels. Over to you.
Thank you. Firstly, thanks to the organizers for having me here today. It's such an honor to be in such a panel. And this is the first panel that I'm sitting where the moderator actually sits so far away from the rest of the panelists. To that question, the two things, right? In my experience in the UN Global Compact engagements, one is definitely the lack of capacity and skill sets within the, especially SME actors, to push sustainability agenda. Because sustainability, SMEs are generally smallish in size and usually have the multi-hat, right? So add another sustainability could be additional pressure. So skill sets to push sustainability is very. But I think this is compounded by the fact that there is still lack of demand. At the end of the day, is how many large supply chains are demanding that the SMEs do this. And until there's a supply and demand equation balance, it's very difficult to meet the equation. So I would say the demand has to be driven up from the large corporate supply chain owners. Then SMEs, being entrepreneurs, they will find a way to do this. So we need to invigorate and ensure demand for sustainable SMEs is there across ASEAN. What type of public partnerships? We've seen some interesting examples here in Malaysia where there is not this government, banking, and also corporate supply chain support to push this agenda. So, we talk about sustainability, we need to talk about the whole of nation approach, right? So you've got to take all the stakeholders along. You can't treat everyone as individual actors. Everybody needs to come to place. So I'm a big believer at the end of the day, if you want to push this, the incentivization has to go to supply chain owners, not the SMEs. Because the supply chain owners are those that are going to create the demand, and the SMEs will look into this, right? And a good example, you look at palm oil. There is demand for sustainable palm oil, and even the smallholders. So what is the best example? Palm oil is the best example, and Malaysia is the best example for that.
Oh, no, excellent. No, thank you. Thank you, Feroz, for allowing us to, pick your brains a little bit on that and thoughtful perspective on some business enablers like demand that we've been hearing from, and some of the business cases that we've actually highlighted, to make sustainability work in practice. It's a timely reminder that economic transformation must also be inclusive, especially for those countries and communities most exposed to climate impact. So, Your Excellency, Ambassador Maria Angela Pons, Your Excellency, the next question is for you, the Philippines has long been an active voice in promoting regional cooperation, and also on climate resilience. So given the Philippines' climate vulnerability, how can ASEAN effectively leverage regional policy frameworks and also financial instruments to channel adaptation financing and green technology transfer to its most vulnerable member states, ensuring a truly equitable and just transition? So we'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther, and good morning. And again, share with my colleagues here the honor of joining this panel. As you know, indeed, as you say, the Philippines is one of the countries that are most vulnerable to climate change. And even as we speak, a super typhoon has just battered the Philippines. And while that typhoon is still exiting, another typhoon is on its way to the Philippines. But the Philippines is not the only, among ASEAN states, it's not the only vulnerable country to climate change. report rankings have indicated that Lao PDR, Myanmar, and Cambodia are also among the countries most vulnerable to climate change, which means that adaptation strategies are very important to ASEAN climate action. There are quite a number of regional frameworks, but I would like to focus on three. And then the fourth one. The first one is the ASEAN Community Vision 2045, which was adopted here in Malaysia last May at the ASEAN Summit. Now this is important because it sets down the vision of ASEAN for the next 20 years. And all of its pillars, including in the social, cultural, and economic pillar. And a very important part is that it has strategic actions as well as objectives on how to achieve what it wants to see by 2045. And one of these is being able to leverage sustainable finance and investment. And it sets down there certain strategic actions as in identifying what are the challenges and then identifying the vulnerability. So this is the overall regional ASEAN framework. And then second is the ASEAN taxonomy on sustainable finance, which was developed by our ASEAN central banks and finance ministers, and that basically tries to map out, with clarity, how to develop projects and determine financing for projects so that they are able to attract and leverage sustainable finance. The third one is not yet, has not yet been adopted. It's a work in progress. It's the ASEAN Strategic Plan on Climate Change. Hopefully, during the chairmanship of the Philippines, we're able to forward on that. But this one also, identifies, the importance of having tailor-made strategies for vulnerabilities, because vulnerability across ASEAN, it's very different, but also within ASEAN countries themselves, the level of vulnerability is different. Now, fourth one, which is very important, the negotiations on climate change are not limited to ASEAN, but are very important, at the UNFCCC, which will be, coming up, I think, in a few weeks' time. And at the ASEAN Summit last week, the ASEAN Heads of State adopted the ASEAN Joint Statement on the UNFCCC. Which is very important because ASEAN needs not negotiate or see itself as having common interests in the climate change negotiations. And having a joint statement, now is a big step forward because it sees that there are commonalities now among our vulnerabilities and the need to act together as a region. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you for sharing your 4 pointers over there. And definitely something for us to, refer to and also spin on as well from here. But ladies and gentlemen, of course, this first section of, region opening round, where we've heard perspectives from the policy, business, and diplomatic fronts, highlighting that collaboration must be multi-layered, inclusive, and forward-looking. So let's now delve deeper into what makes such collaboration operational and what makes it work, right? And the mechanisms, the standards, and the trust that translates ideas into impact. So, as one leadership principle reminds us, vision without execution remains an idea, and execution turns vision into progress. Right? So, this next segment explores tangible aspects, how regional frameworks, cross-border projects, and shared accountability can help turn commitment into measurable progress. So, Your Excellency, I would like to start with you again, if I may begin this next question with you again. So the Philippines, has also been a very strong advocate of the blue economy and regional maritime cooperation. So in your view, how does regional cooperation on maritime governance and security connect directly to achieving sustainable economic growth, particularly in developing the blue economy, while mitigating the climate impacts on shared marine resources? So I'll just over to you. Thank you.
Thank you again. Regional cooperation on maritime governance and security, as you said, is very important to the Philippines. We are an archipelago, the sea surrounds us. And for ASEAN, we are surrounded by seas as well. And as you said, we have common resources there. And for the blue economy to prosper, only recently adopted in 2023 is Blue Economy Framework. But for the Blue Economy to prosper and to attract investments, it's important that we project that there is security in the waters. And that there will be freedom of navigation, and that the goods that will be transported there will have safety and security. This is very important. So that's a priority for us. And then second, you have shared resources there, and the shared resources don't recognize national, boundaries. They don't say, "Oh, I'm crossing the border now, the waters, I'm crossing the waters to the next country." So it's important that you have regional frameworks to manage those resources. The key word really is to conserve and manage these resources so that then you can have sustainable economic growth. Without conservation and sustainability, eventually these resources will be depleted as they are now, and you will have nothing really to call for economic growth.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. Keyword here, conservation. And this perspective on the interconnection also between environmental and economic stability, it's also very, very important. So it reminds us that, while, achieving sustainability often depends on how well we coordinate, conservation and those realities as well. So actually, building on that, can you share what trans-border policy mechanisms such as green shipping corridors or ship sustainability standards are currently being prioritized in Australia's engagement with ASEAN, and how might these collaborations influence regional trade competitiveness and long-term climate outcomes?
So there's a couple of pieces there. Firstly is developing the supply chains to support the energy transition and the development of batteries, hydrogen electrolyzers, and solar PV. And these need to be driven into the future. And then secondly is around decarbonising shipping, which contributes about 3% of global emissions. So two things that Australia has done. Firstly, there's the Quad Supply Chain Diversification Program, and we've put about $24 million into partnerships within ASEAN to undertake research and development and feasibility studies to encourage the development of further manufacturing within the region to diversify the important supply chains required. Also through our Singapore-Australia Green Economy Agreement, which was signed in 2022. This was the first agreement of its kind. Within that, there's a Singapore-Australia Green Digital Shipping Corridor, and so this is set up to sort of enable the development of supply chains for zero or near zero greenhouse emission maritime fuels, encouraging the efficiency of maritime operations, and drawing greater digital tools to accelerate the efficiency of shipping. I think also within the IMO, there's a number of conversations around decarbonisation of the shipping industry, and create these sort of global standards. I think will be fundamental to the future to enable the sort of move of our global supply chains and supply chains in the region to net zero. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Those regional initiatives that you just mentioned, underscore the importance of alignment and consistency also across, economies and also across policy. And at the same time, for change to take root, corporate responsibility and transparency also remain key, right? So as one thought leader said, accountability is the anchor of credibility. So Feroz, how can regional leaders and industries move beyond voluntary commitments to build an environment that ensures accountability and measurable climate impact across sectors, especially in Asia's fast-growing economies? Over to you.
Maybe I'll share this bit personal. So at the UN Global Compact, we have 15 offices in the Asia region. And it's a challenge for us to come to a common program that we can roll across all countries. Because everything is voluntary when it comes to sanitation. But when I look with a little bit of envy to my European counterparts, we have about 12 offices there. They can immediately have a common program because there's a mandatory push by the EU on CSRB, EUDR, all these things. So, so the question is, how do you voluntary, beyond voluntary? So for me, there's only one answer, you have to make it mandatory. But of course, the question is, what is the level, what is mandatory? Because as much as businesses can be the third force for good, the real game changer happens when the government pushes it. And we all see what's happening with the pullback of climate actions, because one particular government is decided to roll back on things. And everybody, so many banks have existed, this global coalition to survive for a number of years until the new government. So without speaking mandatory, difficult when you talk about this change. The other thing that I think that needs to change is sustainable people in the group. You need to realize that the days of just knowing what sustainability is gone. Today we've come to the era where sustainability is much more, it's grown up. It's become more professional. The discourse that sustainable needs to have is very different today. You must be able to navigate the business complexities. You must be able to put sustainability as a core agenda, or climate, or whatever agenda that you want to push, so that it becomes part of the business speak and business narratives in the corridors of power. So sustainable also need to reinvent themselves, become a quasi-technical, strategic, but more so advocacy, right? And don't worry, don't feel overwhelmed. Last year we launched UNGC and Bursa, we launched this sustainability competency framework to guide practitioners to upskill themselves in the new demand of sustainability. But in that, just a last comment, as much as you want to put mandatory, you have to make sure the rules don't change now. Like EUDR, suddenly it's postponed. And those companies who had visionary and strategic sustainability invested early, now have lost that advantage because of that. So while it becomes mandatory, the goalpost cannot keep shifting. That's my comment.
Thank you for also your comments and also giving us examples, real life examples of how we can actually draw some insights from it as well. So this round highlights that sustainable collaboration requires not only shared vision but also shared accountability. Every policy, partnership, and business initiative reinforces trust and transparency across borders. So in short, this section we've already discussed a little bit about building a foundation, how do we align policies, engage business in fostering inclusive regional cooperation. Second question that all of us have also sort of discussed about strengthening that foundation through practical mechanism, maritime partnerships that Excellency have highlighted as well, and accountability, equity, and action. Right? So now, let's move into the next section, which is looking into the future. Very important to reflect on some of the lessons how can we actually carry forward, and how Asia's leader can continue shaping this collective journey together. So Peter Drucker once said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. And as we look to the future, it's important to reflect on these lessons and the standards we need to uphold and shape pathways we must continue building together. So now I'm going to start with Faroz on this section. Let's start again with you. From the UN Global Compact's perspective, so what are the non-negotiable ESG standards that Asian companies should adopt today to remain competitive and maintain market access in an increasingly sustainability-driven global economy? So,
this thing with non-negotiable.
non-negotiables.
Personally, if you ask me, at personal level, one non-negotiable is every senior leader must have a KPI on this that ties to remuneration. That's my personal opinion. But at the UN Global Compact, of course, we champion our 10 principles, which revolves around anti-corruption, human rights, labor, and environment. So I think this should be part and parcel of business opportunities. But then again, sustainability is grown up, like I said, it's mature. Everybody knows the hard part. Everybody knows we need to do climate, we need to report for NSRF, all this. But I'm still unsure whether people still believe, because we're not talking about how do we humanize sustainability. We are very fixated with many big technical things, which, let's face it, majority, 99% actually don't understand the moment you go into the details of criticism, and all this. It's very difficult to catch on. So where is the humanization of this aspect? If you really want to make this mainstream, we need to humanize this. And we need to bring human words into this. And looking at today's geopolitical issues, the amount of the atrocity and genocide that's happening in Gaza, I think one big word we must not miss is justice. So for me, a non-negotiable aspect of Gaza is how often do we speak about the word justice in our business operations. And SDG 16 is actually about justice, peace, and strong organizations. What is the role of business and peace? What is the role of justice? Because when you talk about climate, when you talk about business and human rights, at the end of the day, when you talk about humanizing it, is are you doing justice to your supply chain? Are you doing justice to your community? So we need to bring this way. So for me, non-negotiable is that we need to go back to the table, to humanize this, to have human conversations. Because at the end of the day, sustainability is not about making technical shifts. Sustainability comes down to the fact that it's human decisions. Whether we want to invest, whether we want to change, and we don't look at the heart and the spirit of things, what's going to happen is what's happening today. We have a lot of these fantastic frameworks. People don't understand, people don't believe. The moment something changes, everybody exists. Right? So we need to look at the human qualities. For me, that is not negotiable. We need to have more conversations and we need to ask ourselves, what justice are we doing to this world? Then we will change. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Farouz. Two words, humanize and also justice. So looking at the human aspect of justice, very important. Awesome. And it's encouraging to also see business policy starting to align more closely than ever before. So Ashley, from your regional vantage point, what are some key lessons from Asia's leaders that Australians have adopted or plan to integrate in balancing trade growth with environmental stewardship, especially in supporting sustainable and inclusive economic development?
Yeah, thank you, Esther. I suppose there's a couple of commonalities between Asia and Australia's state of play in regards to the energy transition. Firstly, I guess, is the structure of our energy system and our electricity system. Australia has quite a dated grid dating back to the sort of late 80s, and legacy coal assets. Secondly, the sort of emissions intensity of our exports and the sort of need to sort of switch our economy, and then I guess the move towards green export opportunities and sort of moving to the new green economy. And so within that, I guess there's lessons firstly about scaling in finance to support electrification. And hopefully through Australia's COP31 in Partnership with the Pacific, we can really sort of work together with Asia to accelerate the energy transition and sort of balance the introduction of increased variable renewable energy and sort of use burned power to sort of support renewable energy within our systems. Also shifting and scaling new green products, including green hydrogen, diversification of critical minerals, and the renewable power products that I discussed earlier. And then also shifting to low carbon manufacturing green commodities such as sustainable palm oil and green steel. So I think these are really powerful lessons that we can learn from the experience of Asia. And there's just given the sort of dynamism and growth in innovation happening in this region, I think it's really powerful that we sort of are able to actually collaborate, share R&D, share sort of finance to sort of drive, I think, these fundamental changes in our economies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley, for sharing that. We always say, experiences as a good teacher, but evaluated experiences, from lessons are best teachers. So thank you for sharing those. As we look ahead, ASEAN will continue to play a pivotal role in advancing climate and economic collaboration. And as we've just ended our ASEAN conference, Summit just recently, but also Your Excellency, as the Philippines now prepares for its ASEAN chairmanship going forward from here. What are some of the key policy priorities or initiatives are you most committed to advancing to strengthen ASEAN's collective leadership in fostering transborder economic and climate collaboration? Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. And I'd like to tie up what you said about, looking ahead, and what Farouk said about humanizing the narrative of sustainability. In the Philippines, we have a saying that says, and I will say it in Filipino, ang hindi marunong tumingin sa pinanggalingan ay hindi makakarating sa pupuntahan. Which means, if you do not know how to look back, you will not get to where you want to go. And so that ties into, every chairship of ASEAN thrives and builds on continuity. Every chairship of ASEAN does not start from a clean slate or from a blank slate. And so it is very important for the Philippines that it continue to build on the initiatives of Malaysia in its successful chair as ASEAN of ASEAN for 2025. In the same way that Malaysia also built on the initiatives of the previous chairs of ASEAN. And very important in that is the ASEAN Community Vision 2045, which I already mentioned earlier, because that sets out the roadmap for ASEAN communities and for ASEAN peoples. And the Philippines has the responsibility of being the first one to work on the implementation of what has been identified there as the goals of ASEAN. At the turnover just last week of the ASEAN chairship of the Philippines, our President Marcos Jr. identified our theme as navigating the future together. So it's a theme that looks to moving together as one forward. And I do not wish to preempt, the priorities, because next week my president will also have the official launch of our ASEAN chairmanship, which then he will identify the priorities of the Philippines as chair. But again, as I said, continuity is important, and one of these, aside from the initial implementation of the ACP 2045, is also the continuing work on the ASEAN strategic plan on climate change. Now to tie back to what Farouk said on the humanizing the discussion and sustainability. I was part of in my previous hand as part of our team to the United Nations in New York. I was a negotiator for the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the Paris Agreement on climate change. So this was in 2015, the super mega year of multilateral agreements. And at the time, there was so much enthusiasm, there was so much hope, and there was so much anticipation, and there was so much humanization of the process and of the discussions and the negotiations. And a big part there really was the UN Global Compact, because they brought in the voice of the stakeholders from the private sector. So everything was brought in there. And then we set a goal for 2030 for something to happen, to achieve all of these SDGs that we identified, and then we set the means of implementation, we set a roadmap on how to get there, and then we set up monitoring, every year, every now and then, like what's happening now. At the same time, even for the Paris Agreement, you set the goal of the 2.5 goal. And midway, I think, like 2020, 2021, everyone was in desperation, because especially for climate change and for the oceans, what they were looking at, what they were seeing was that we were not going to reach our goals by 2030. And I think along the way, SDGs, became really a buzzword that lost its connection to, this human aspect of it. So I think it's important, and I agree that we bring it back. Now, it's for all of these old negotiators, it's good to see that it is integrated now. ESG is not just, as you said, greenwashing, but something that really the private sector and corporations really integrate into their systems. We hope that the work can continue on that, and I think that's important also. This partnership between the governments, as you said, for the government to push it, but also for the private sector to see that being sustainable in your practices and in your systems, it makes good business sense. So the government cannot do it alone. Private sector cannot do it alone, especially MSMEs cannot do it alone. But individual governments as well cannot do it alone. So they need to really work together in order for an accomplishment, to move forward to see that by 2030, if we have not accomplished our goals, then at least we have moved closer to them and we reevaluate to say, what's working and what's not working. Now, for the ASEAN chairmanship, again, as I said, the environment and energy is a pillar. We have our ministers meeting on energy. We have our ministers meeting on environment. And we also have our ministers meeting on finance and central bank governors. And they recognize that they're not standalone pillars. To move forward, they must work together and coordinate and integrate all of the actions that they plan together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And of course, we've discussed quite a number of different things here, and of course, this cannot just, sum up in a short 30 minutes or so. Continuity is a keyword here. We'd love to continue to have these conversations off the stage later as well. If you've got any questions, feel free to approach and have your side conversations from there. But to end this panel, I would just like to, if there's anything that you would like the audience to just remember, just one keyword that they've got all that you've shared here. Is there one keyword that I can invite our panelists here to just share with the audience? Just one keyword. Can we start with Ashley?
Finance.
Finance? Awesome. In your excellency, what would be your one word?
Continuity.
Sorry?
Continuity.
Continuity, yes, of course, yeah. And Feroz? Bole. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's give our round of applause for the speakers. And thank you very much. And let's continue to welcome conversations after this as well. Thank you.
Bole, thank you so much for a great panel. Excellent. And I think we need to take a picture, and then I will swiftly move to the introduction of the next panel.